Hey, everybody, and welcome to another live booktube session. Today I am chatting with author Sam Hawke. Sam, how are we doing?
We're pretty good, thanks. Thanks for
Good.
having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's been a long time coming at this point. I think we've been talking about doing this probably since I started doing it. So,
Yeah, I think actually you mentioned it when you first sort of had the conception of doing the station. And it's just been a long year for us all, hasn't it?
yeah, it really is. It feels like it's been about a decade and in 11 months. So, I'm just glad that you're alive here to do it.
Well, it's good to see you from the other side of the
Yeah,
world.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know we saw each other. What about it's been 5 months now,
Six, 5 months,
since
yeah.
Mayday Con. Yeah, and even that feels like it was so far away. I feel like it was another lifetime ago. But yeah, so we're here to talk a little bit about life writing, and of course we'll talk about Hollow Empire, which is hitting on the 1st of December. I know that's something you're super excited about as well as us, so we'll definitely touch on that. But I just want to know, tell me a little bit about what's been going on with you, these past few months. How I guess since Mayday Con, what have you been up to?
As you probably know, Australia's been a bit luckier than you guys with Corona. So
Maybe a little bit.
a little bit. So we've been pretty okay. Like where I live, we never had community transmission at any point, and we haven't had a new case since. Other than a returning diplomat or two, we haven't had a new case since about June or July, I think. So things are pretty normal here. Aside from the usual things, you can't, my kids' school doesn't have assemblies, and there's no free play at the pool, and you still have restrictions on the number of people's in venues. But largely speaking, we've been very lucky. So I've just been kind of watching the rest of you guys and feeling awful. I'm very conscious that we've got the lucky sort of situation here. And even during lockdown, it wasn't. I had a lot of things which were very fortunate in my circumstances because we have garden the kids to run around in and bounce on the trampoline. It would have been very different if COVID and the bushfires had intersected, because I think last time we talked, we were only just sort of recovering from the fact that we couldn't go outside for several months, which was a really, really rough time for everyone. And now we're hurtling back into bushfire season again, so we'll see how it goes. But largely speaking, things are pretty much back to normal for my everyday life. I have to go back to my day job at the actual office again, which is a bit sad. But the kids are at school, and everything's kind of ticking along as normal.
Yeah, that's so crazy to hear. Yeah, it's only getting worse here, and to hear the
Yeah,
fact that you guys have been kind of okay since June or July, I'm just like,
yeah, I know.
man,
It's
if only
awful.
we didn't have so much arrogance here in the U.S.
Oh, look, there's a lot of factors. Obviously, we're an island, but there was just a lot of public pressure on the federal government very early, and being led from our states, that everyone was very kind of, the attitude here was just pretty pro lockdown straight away. Like everyone was quite okay with the idea that, okay, we'll all stay in and lock down and get rid of this thing.
Yeah,
And Victoria in particular has just done amazing work with their real sustained lockdowns to get on top of it. It's just incredible to see. But you've got to have community support and government support, working together in order to make it work.
yeah, that
And
doesn't
yeah,
work here.
no, it's really
Unfortunately, we
awful.
don't know how to really, put those things together. So
Yeah,
it's a bit difficult apparently for us. So,
yeah. Well,
um,
hopefully things might get better now. We won't have like people in charge for much longer who are pretending it's not a real problem.
who friggin'
Hopefully,
knows? I'm seeing the the people that are being appointed in the new campaign. I'm just like, I feel like it's gonna be more of the same, or if not worse. But I don't know. I feel like it's unfortunate because you still have just two sides that just can't get along, and I feel like that's just gonna be the thing until I don't know, until one
yeah,
side shows that they can be like, okay, we're all going to actually like come together and do this. But I
It's
just feel
hard
like
when
people,
one side seems to be okay with the other side dying. That's,
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
hard thing to overcome.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and you see why COVID is still a thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's rough. I try to.
Anyway, sorry, fantasy books.
No, you're good. You're good. No, we're kind of like in our little bubble in Alabama where I feel like we're kind of on the outside looking in, kind of like you guys are. I mean, we still have COVID and stuff, but we're seeing higher numbers, but we also are very spread out in the state. So it's not like we're sitting in the middle of New York City where there's,
Yeah.
millions of people within a couple of
Yeah, all
blocks.
packed together.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, that's good. That's good to hear that you're doing well. I hate to hear that you have to go back to the office. I don't even know what that's like anymore.
I got very used to working at home. It suited me fine. I know some people were like missing going in, and I did miss like seeing people. That's true.
Yeah.
But basically everything about my life was easier when I didn't have to leave the house to go to work. I can work in elasticized pants at all time and so on.
Oh yeah, there is nothing better than waking up in pajama pants, grabbing a cup of coffee, and sitting down and working, and not having to like get in your car and actually put on real clothes.
I know, right? I usually get up. I get up and my kids and I walk our dogs, and then we do. I don't know how much it made its way over to America, but there was this thing called Pee with Joe, which was like a guy in the UK. It's like a YouTube fitness dude who started running daily free classes when the schools closed down in England, and it turned into this whole worldwide thing. And so my kids and I started doing that back in March or whenever it started, and we've just kept doing it. So we get up and we go walking, and then we do like a workout with this YouTube station, which was fine when I could then be like just stay in my yoga pants and do my day job. But now I have to like shower and put clothes back on. I have to put my feet into things that aren't sneakers. It's very disappointing.
Dadgummit, normal life.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
Yeah, it's like I don't even know like what normality will look like anymore. Like, I mean, I've been back. So like we in the middle of COVID, we transferred to a new office, and so we had to go set up there. Well, they only let like 2 people at a time every hour go in and set up their office. And we've got about 40, 45 employees. And then since then, I've been back a few times, but there's only been like 5 or 7 people there at a time, which is great to see them. But I'm like, it just feels really weird. And now, back at the house, and I'll still work here, but I'm like, it gets lonely. I've got 3 dogs, but like at the same time, like they can't talk,
No, I know. And they're very lazy colleagues, I found with my
Yeah, they really are. They don't do
They
squat.
contributed nothing,
I'm like, can you wash some dishes?
Do something.
I mean, I don't want them licking the bowls to put up in the pantry, but it's do something.
It was really nice for a while because my husband and I were both working from home at the same time. So I had company, and we had the dogs, and he'd go for a lunchtime walk, and it was all very pleasant. But then he had to go to the office. He had to go back before I did, and it's less appealing by yourself, I must say. And it is nice. Going back and seeing my colleagues is lovely. And it felt really weird at first, but it's kind of settling back into normal now, I think.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be a new normal, honestly. Like businesses
absolutely.
kind of have to, especially businesses like the industry that I work in, where we've really kind of conclusively proven that we can still work just as effectively from home for most of the year. So there's just not really that kind of assumption that it can't be done anymore. So I think there'll be a real shift in how we look at working from home, which is good, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Works a lot better.
I work in, I guess you can kind of call it IT. I mean, I'm in telecommunications, so I work for a company that works on cell phone towers. So, we had like a remote day a week that we did. This was like 2 years ago, and then they, one of our CEOs, like was going business to business and was noticing like absentees, and so he was like, "All right, everybody's 5 days a week in the office." And then since COVID started, our production's gone up because everybody's working remotely. And I'm like, there's no way you can tell everybody to come back when you're doing way better. Our stock's gone up like $20. So I'm like, I think there's something to this.
Right. I mean, we just like just the extra time factor, because I know you'll find the same when your daughter's a bit older, but when you when you have kids and you've got sort of deadlines for how you got to get out of it at the end of the day, I can just work so much more of the day when it's at home because I can go grab the kids and bring them back and then just sit straight back down at the computer and it's not a problem. And just dropping, an hour's transit time each day makes a difference as well. There's just everything kind of in my life worked a bit better because you could manage things around the house a bit easier when you're home during the day. And I mean, most of this was for our winter. Obviously, we're coming into summer now. And so, there's the battle of like getting your clothes out into the light and getting them back in before the window of opportunity ends. Here in winter at about, if you're any later than about 3 p.m. to get your clothes off the line, they won't dry. So you've got to start the whole process again. So, it's just little things like that, and putting dinner on at lunchtime, so you've got it in the slow cooker or whatever. Just some little things like that actually save you heaps of time and mean you can work a longer work day because you have less home things. Anyway, I'm still working. Yeah. I'm still working part-time from home and part-time from the office. So
I gotcha. Yeah. I have noticed that it just makes the day go by a little easier because while I'm here, I can do laundry, I can do dishes.
Yeah, exactly.
All kinds of stuff. I can read a book if I want to, and I don't have people like walking by my office door going, "You're not getting any work done," So I don't know, but no, it was definitely a lot easier when my wife was working from home too, because she's a first grade teacher, so they went virtual in March, and then they were done in May. But then June hit, we had the baby, so she was home till right at the tail end of August, and then she's been there. So I feel like it's been like September. It's just been like, oh gosh, I need normalcy. this whole like working from home and being like single dad while she's teaching, it's really difficult.
Yeah, look, you've got a child under one. It's a tough year, and you've got the added bonus of it being the world's toughest year anyway. You've added an infant.
I know. We really
playing on hard mode.
Yeah, we planned this out really well. Oh my gosh. So all right, let's
look, in some ways you're going to be exhausted this year anyway, so you might as well make it,
mentally and physically in one or two or three different ways. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about prior to 2020. I want to know, who is Sam Hawke? Who was she growing up? What did she want to be when she grew up? Because not everybody wants to be a writer when they grow up. And how did you become a writer?
Well, I did want to be a writer when I grew up. As soon as I figured out that was a job that people were allowed to do. I was putting together books, definitely in kindergarten. I was making my own novels, which were like sheets of A4 paper stapled together, which I would draw an elaborate cover for, and I would write all of the chapter names. And in that age group, I was very, very into Enid Blyton books. So all of my stories at that sort of kinder year one sort of age group were very much focused on like kids having adventure sort of stories. And they had, I don't know whether you guys read as much. I suspect Enid Blyton was more of a UK and an Australian thing, but it's like, the Faraway Tree and Famous Five and all of those sort of books. So I'd write really dramatic Enid Blyton-esque chapter names, like, Simon gets a nasty surprise, or what happened when they opened the box, and stuff like that as my dramatic chapter names. And then I'd write like 1 or 2 sentences, and then I would abandon the project. So, I feel like just established early on my desire to be an author and also my extreme laziness and poor follow through, which was very representative of who I was and continue to be as a person. But I also, I sort of have no sense of a time where I didn't want to write books. I remember my older brother telling me one day that I should be a writer because he was watching with great amusement as I was playing a game by myself. My parents had this huge backyard, and I just used to wander around telling myself stories, but I'd be playing a game, and unlike, a normal human child who might be like just playing the game in their head and like doing actions, I would narrate the whole thing. So I'd be like crawling around underneath the kiwi fruit, sort of muttering, She wondered exactly what she was going to find when she pushed aside the leaves. She lifted her hand, pushed it aside. Oh, she gasped. And I just like narrating it out loud like that because I was a little weirdo. And yeah, I remember my brother saying, I think you should probably be a writer. So yeah, I always wanted to do that. And I probably started trying to write proper novel length things by the time I was in about year 3 or year 4. And I never really stopped trying to do it, but I must have at some point in my teens figured out that it wasn't a very viable career financially. Because I obviously at some point transitioned into thinking, well, you know, I want to write books, but I'm going to have, you know, a day job as well. So yeah, I never really stopped throughout my teens. I was working on one big epic fantasy novel. So I think I started at about age 13 and finally finished at about age 18. I'm not fast, as you have probably gathered. But in the meantime, you know, I decided to, I kind of accidentally became a lawyer, which is my day job. But it wasn't on purpose. I wanted to be a lawyer. I liked doing, you know, mock trial and debating and stuff when I was in high school. And I was very argumentative. So that probably led me to thinking this would be a fun thing to do. But like many people who go to law school, by the time I'd finished law school, I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. So I was going to be an accountant instead, which was the other degree that I did. And you know, I applied for a bunch of accounting jobs, and even accepted one. And I was going to be a tax accountant in Brisbane, which is a city up north here. And yeah, I'd accepted the job, and my then partner, now husband, had also accepted a job up there, and we were all set to move. And then we had like a last minute change of heart based on a few things. My grandma wasn't very well. I was starting to freak out about leaving the family dog, who also wasn't doing very well at the time. And I was starting to panic about melting in Brisbane because I don't cope with the heat very well. And my husband, Chris, got offered a better job here in Canberra. And so we just sort of had like a last minute, actually, we're going to stay here. And because we did that, I decided to take one of the Canberra jobs that I applied for, which turned out, it was one of those, I don't know whether you do the same thing, but our big government agencies have graduate recruitment where you kind of apply to the agency generally, and then they slot you into what area they think you'll be best suited for. So I had like a panel interview with about 5 different areas in the department. And then they sorted me into a legal area, and that was it. I was like, oh, right, I'm a lawyer now, I guess. So after all of that, you know, doing other degrees and thinking I was going to be something else, I ended up being a lawyer, which turned out to be very good because, as it turns out, it's a really good job that I like a lot. So yeah, I did sort of focused on doing that, and didn't do a lot of serious writing in my 20s really. I did a lot of editing for other people, and a lot of reading, but I had kind of stalled on my own projects. And yeah, then I had a kid, and I think it was when I was home having a year off after I had my son, that a friend of mine, who's also a writer, sort of prodded me gently about my own writing, and I kind of thought, you know, gosh, I'm home. My child never sleeps, so I'm awake like 23 hours a day. If I'm ever going to write a book, it will probably be now. So I sort of knuckled down and dug out an old project that I'd started 6 years before or something, and dug it out and thought, well, this is actually okay. I don't know why I abandoned this after 20,000 words, and finished it. And that was what became It Is Wise. So yeah, having kind of accidentally gotten a different career, I came back to what I wanted to do in the end. Although I should say, teenage self was quite correct in wanting to have a sensible day job, because this would be a very, very different and much more stressful year if I was trying to rely on writing income. Yeah, yeah, that's kind of how I got here.
Man, I just love how you say you accidentally became a lawyer. Like, who
Yeah.
accidentally becomes a lawyer?
People, yeah, like there's few the way the system works here, you get like an entrance ranking after year 12, what we call college and you'd call high school. You get a numerical ranking out of 100, and what courses that you're allowed to do at university depend on what ranking you got, basically. So I got a very high ranking, and it kind of seemed, like you should do a degree that goes with your high ranking, and I still at that point sort of wanted to be a lawyer, I think, or at least I knew I was interested enough that it would be a sensible degree to do that I'd be able to get a job with. And yeah, so I'd sort of tossed up between something like engineering and law, and then just chose law. Kind of, I don't know if I had any really strong feelings about it. So I still think even back then it was more a product of oh yeah, that's just a sensible kind of thing to do, rather than being driven by any kind of passion. And like I should say, I'm not the kind of lawyer that people think of when they think of lawyers. Like I don't go to court or do contracts or any wills or any of that sort of stuff. I just write legal advice about kind of old and complicated legislation, which means that essentially my job is English comprehension. It'll be about solving a puzzle of what this phrase in this bit of legislation means and what's the significance of this comma and stuff. So it's actually very compatible with being a writer, because it's almost entirely about what do words mean in context and with that particular legislative history. So it's a great job for nerds. You just sit around quietly in offices and write advices about commas, and we're all very happy with it.
But yeah, I guess that kind of helped, with editing too, because you've really got to focus in and hone in on certain things, and so you're trying to figure out, okay, why did certain things happen, or why did this person, in a book, why did this character choose this path, and so forth. So it kind of makes you comprehend a little bit more in depth than just very surface level.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. They're definitely compatible skills.
I just love how you're like, lawyer, engineering. I contemplated engineering right out of high school, because I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I went through freshman year and I was like, this isn't too bad. And I got to sophomore year and I go, this is definitely not for me. And I went into business, and I was way better for it. But of course, I was like, being in business, I'm going to do something in marketing, and then I'm in freaking telecommunications. Like, this is really what I wanted to do. This is what I went to a 4-year university for. I could have gotten this job with no education and been fine.
I think a lot more people end up in jobs accidentally than deliberately.
That's very true. Yeah, I feel like there's like maybe 5 to 10% that actually like pursue becoming a surgeon or a nurse or something. Those kind of professions. And there's some that do law, or some that want to be like in politics. But no, I feel like a lot of people just kind of, or I guess a teacher. You kind of have to want to be a teacher. I mean, you can.
Yeah, well,
you can be a teacher, but
when you're about, when you're sort of 17, 18 and you're being expected to make these decisions about what degree you're going to do, I just think the range of jobs that actually exist is not very visible. So like the jobs that you're listing, they're jobs that you're exposed to as a young person. You see people doing those jobs, and so their options. But even sort of contemplating being a lawyer, it never occurred to me that there was a job whereby I could just sit quietly in an office arguing about commas, because that would have been incredibly appealing to me at all times. But you don't really know that these things exist, so you have to sort of stumble into them. And yeah, like I think particularly in my case, if you were like a high achiever at school, there's kind of just the subjects that you take when you're a smart kid. And so you do physics and chemistry and the top level maths and stuff, because they're the subjects the smart kids do. And you don't have to necessarily have a passion for them or anything. They're just, they're sort of expected of you. And then there's only sort of so many obvious careers that you think of when you get to that point. Oh, what degree shall I do? And, law and engineering and medicine and stuff are the kind of high level ones that you think, oh, maybe I should do one of those. But there's actually, there's just so many things you can do in life. I was listening to the Fantasy Inn podcast, and they had I had an author on whose day job is just so interesting. It's about sound design in sort of movies and TV and everything. And
Is that the one with Essa Hansen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was such a great interview, and she's so interesting, and her job is fantastic. But like things like that, they're just not jobs that would have occurred to me as a teenager was a job option. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how you overcome that, but I think a lot of the time you just necessarily don't you're not in a position to make the right decisions at the age you're expected to get degrees. So I think heaps of people do degrees that are the wrong thing for what they will ultimately do, just because they didn't know what the options were or what they would be like. And of course, obviously, heaps of people are quite different at age 18 as compared to age 30.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, you know,
Yeah,
we'll get there
and I mean,
eventually.
you know, you think, you know, at 18, you know, as soon as you get out of college, you're going to be doing exactly what you went in to do. And then, you know, most of the time, as soon as you get your degree, you go completely 180 degrees in a different direction. But with Essa Hansen, I would trade my job for her job any day because I had her on several weeks ago, and yeah, it just sounds amazing. She's like, yeah, I'm just, you know, I just put in sounds for different things, and you know, and I get sent this list of sounds, and I get to decide which one goes in. So I just throw them all on a wall, and if it sounds great, great, and if it doesn't, you will go back to the drawing board, and I go, that just sounds amazing, and I never knew
I
that
know,
job
right?
existed.
And such a brilliant combination of creativity and technical skills as well. It's just a beautiful thing. But yeah, I don't believe there's that many teenagers out there who know that that's a career option and can kind of sensibly plot their life to do something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Also, they keep making up new fun jobs that like didn't exist when I was a teenager. So
yeah, and you know, it's one of those things where like you just continually see things that you're like, oh, I wish I had that when I was that age. Oh, I wish I had that when you know, like all this
yeah,
stuff about like coding and stuff. Like they have toys for like 3 and 4 year olds for coding, and I go,
yeah.
why didn't that exist? Because IT is
I
like
know.
where the money's at, you know. So
Well, that's true. I got my son this toy last year, which is called a Turing Tumble. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're like a big sort of a plastic board with pegs. And the premise of the game is that you assemble different shaped pieces and attach them to the pegs, and then you drop balls from the top, and they have to map their way down to go to the different slots at the bottom. And it's a mechanical toy that's teaching this kind of thinking that you need for logic and coding. So, you know, the pieces are like switches, basically. You know, the balls will hit them in a particular way and go left or right or whatever, and you've got to assemble the pattern to make them do the thing that you want them to do. So it's like teaching the right thinking, but it's not a screen game. It's an actual physical thing that they can build and play with. And it's such a cool toy. I love it so much. My sons both love it. And yeah, there's just so many fun things that I spent probably far too much time during COVID, you know, assuaging my guilt for being okay by supporting lots of local businesses, aka doing too much internet shopping.
oh my gosh. So
anyway, now I've done a random spooking for
exactly. So okay, so I want to know, you know, how was your writing process changed from? I mean, clearly it's changed from when you were a little bit younger to, you know, your teens to now that you've written your first novel and now you're about to release your second novel. You know, what have you kind of, I guess, learned about yourself through writing? Besides, you know, you talk about being a lazy writer, but you know, besides that, you know, like what have you learned? Like, what are the things that, you know, maybe you used to do but you don't do now, or that you continue to do because you found maybe that's a good, you know, path to start on and continue?
Yeah,
That might be a really loaded question. I'm sorry.
No, I've learned quite a few things. The question is how many of them I actually apply in practice. For example, I know that having an outline is amazing. I bloody love having an outline. I just hate writing them. So I mean, sometimes it's a product of time, right? I had unlimited amount of time to plan City of Lies. So when I actually was doing the writing, I had a legit scene by scene outline, and it's so much more. I find the first draft process the hardest bit. just actually getting the story down. I know lots of people like drafting and hate editing, and I'm the other way around. So I had this beautiful outline that could help, if you can look at a little summary and say, right, in this scene, this thing has to happen, these people have to feel this thing, and so on. It makes it a lot easier to get through the actual putting down of words. But of course, doing that outline, is just sends me into the pits of despair. Outlines are hard. And I'm also simultaneously the kind of writer who, although I might struggle a bit with getting the words down initially, I also very much figure out things about the story as I write it, which makes outlining quite hard. So I think I figured out about myself that ideally I need a structure with the large points of the story in it, but with enough flexibility that I can change things around as I go. I think I must do a lot of subconscious planning, or else I've just been very lucky, because a bunch of times I'll have written myself into what I feel like is a dead end, and I'll sit there freaking out about, oh God, how am I going to get out of this? And then I will go back and realize that I'd laid the groundwork for something already. So you'll have this great idea and think, oh, what if I did that? And you look back at the draft and you're like, oh, I've already set that up with this, and this. So yeah, I feel like a lot of the time my subconscious is doing good work, although I wish it would let me in on the secret sometimes, because there've been some stressful moments where I don't know what to do. So like my process seems to be different. It seems to be different every book so far. I don't have a long enough career yet to know what's going to consistently stick, and maybe nothing sticks and every book is different. I mean, some people write differently for each project they take on. I'm writing a new project now, which I'm writing in a way that I don't think I've ever tried to do before, which is I'm just not writing it chronologically, and I'm writing bits of the book, whatever takes my fancy. And that has mostly been not deliberate, but just because I'm trying to do Nano this month, and I just have so much on. I don't have enough time to agonize over getting the words down. I just have to get them down. So at the moment, my very glamorous schedule involves getting up at 5:30 in the morning to get a chunk of words down before my kids wake up at 6, and we go dog walking and do the school preparation and everything, to knock some off. And then, I try to get some done at lunchtime or in the evening. I've unfortunately been a bit unwell for a couple of months now, and it's meant that I fall asleep really early, or indeed any time my head rests on a comfortable surface. So that has added some challenges, and has kind of necessitated getting work done earlier in the day, because I often get into the evening and just can't. I just fall asleep. I can't do things. I'm sitting at the computer and suddenly my eyes are shut. So yeah, that's the kind of process at the moment, is trying to get whatever words come to mind from whatever bit of the story that I'm writing. And we'll see how that goes. Like maybe in a few months' time, I'll be telling you how much I hate past Sam for doing this, because I can't reconstruct all of these disparate bits into a coherent narrative. Because otherwise I'd always written strictly chronologically. I could not jump ahead to any other point. I had to get there organically. So we'll see. City and Hollow Empire were both written very differently, with very different levels of planning. And then this one is different again. So maybe I have no system. Maybe I just haven't found a system that works consistently yet. Maybe eventually I'll get there. You'll talk to me in 5 years and I'll be like, yes, I do this and this and this, and suddenly books are there.
Yes, I just type some words out and the book is magically done. Yeah.
This is my dream. I did say I was lazy. If somebody else could somehow make the book happen.
You don't sound very lazy though, man. You're up at 5:30 and you do all the stuff before your kids go to school, and then you go do your day job, and then you come home and you attempt to write. I can't imagine it, because I'm up at 5 every morning, except for when my wife's off work, and I'm go till usually 8 or 9, but like as soon as like my head hits the pillow, I'm out. Like I don't know how I find the time to do anything, so I can't imagine attempting to write while also doing all the other things.
Yeah. My theory is I just do everything badly.
That's one way to do it.
half-assing a lot of things as opposed to being able to whole-ass anything. So, I frequently feel like I'm, completely failing as a writer and a parent and not doing anywhere near as well at my day job as I could, and just generally being crap at everything. But I suspect that's just what so many people feel like when they're juggling a whole bunch of things. And my in many ways I'm in very, very privileged existence, so I can't complain. But yeah, getting everything done does feel difficult. I don't love getting up at 5:30 in the morning to get words out. I've got to tell you, it's not my favorite. And I'll do anything to procrastinate from things, despite knowing that I'll feel so much better if I just get it done. It's like I'm trapped. I'm a lazy person trapped in a very busy person's life, and it's very distressing.
Yeah, I know how you feel. Yeah, I'm kind of a perfectionist, so that's probably also why I still haven't gotten back to my draft that I'd started 2 months ago. Yeah, I wrote 1,000 words and just haven't touched it since. I'm like, it has to be perfect before I can move on. And
so this is why I'm bad at drafting too.
Yeah. I don't know what is it, and it's and some of the stuff's a little bit there's probably a little OCD in there somewhere, because everything has to be like right where it needs to be. Like I did a lot of like proofing and stuff before I started doing reviews, and so I'd read a bunch of indie, and I would do like little proof edits and so forth. So I'm very minuscule about it. So every time I go back and read my 1,000 words, I always change something. And that's probably why I'll never finish a book. I'll just enter that into short fiction contests and just be like, there you go, good luck. Tell me if it's any good.
Oh gosh, I feel that very hard, David. I'm very much the same, which is why drafting is so slow for me. It's because I find it very difficult to write something and then not immediately start judging it harshly.
I've always been told just write all the words and then come back to it.
I know.
I can't. That's not how my brain works.
Yeah. I'm getting there. You can kind of train to do it if that's any consolation.
I'm trying to think. Is there a way that you can just like type something out and not just actually like visually see it? Can you just type and type and type and type and type, and then when you're done typing, can you see it?
I think there's probably a setting on Scrivener or something that lets you do that. You can definitely
do it all in white
mode where it constantly does. Yeah, you can do it in white. Like you can definitely train yourself to get better at it, and I'm getting much better at doing timed sprints in which the competitive sort of side gets in. You want to try to get as many words as you can in. I always do 20 minutes. My sister and I both will often do this simultaneously. So we'll, text each other. Okay, we'll go do a 20-minute sprint, and then try to get as many words as we can. And I do find that having the kind of competitive goal of can I get more words out than last time does help me switch off the editor brain part, so it stops me being too critical of what I'm writing. And at the moment, because I'm trying to do nano, making sure I get the word counts up, I don't have time in my day. Like my day is just too full and I'm too tired. I can't stuff around. So I just need to get those words out, which means I don't want to delete any words that I've written, which makes me move on. So I think I'll probably this time end up with a draft that looks more like a standard first draft, full of stuff that I'm going to change. Whereas normally my first drafts take a really long time, but they're quite good. Like because I'm stuffing around with them as I go.
Right.
They don't require a heavy kind of. They're sort of not. There's not a lot of grammatical or spelling errors or anything in them because I'm quite careful when I write the first time. Whereas this one is rubbish. And people have been telling me for years how you meant to make the first draft rubbish. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Again, I can spend 6 months time complaining about how terrible my first draft is. But at least I will have one which I think is probably always best. So anyway, if you can try to trick yourself into not editing by having some sort of self-imposed rules to motivate you, it does seem to help, and you get better at getting words out. So I can sort of reliably get between 600 to 900 words out in a 20-minute sprint now, which would have been just unheard of for me a couple of years ago. I just would have been sitting there agonizing over words. They're not good words, mind, but they're on the paper, and I quite like editing, so it's not a problem to fix them later.
Yeah, because I just like spit out I think it was like 998 words in about 20 or 25 minutes. I was like, man, that felt really good. Now where do I go? And I just daydreamed about where I could go, and there's nothing's just hitting. And I'm like, all right, shelve it.
Yeah, sometimes you've got to be willing to be crap for a bit and sort it out later.
Yeah, and I think some of it comes from like, I don't know what genre I want to write in. Like I want to write a fantasy novel. I also want to write a horror novel. I also want to write a thriller. And I haven't quite gotten to science fiction yet. I haven't been like, space opera, let's do it, I
don't want to say you have to. I don't want to say you have to pick one of those, because you can combine elements, but you probably do need to know sort of vaguely what genre you're writing in. I mean, City is essentially a closed room mystery. Fantasy can just be the setting that a book is in. It doesn't have to be. Like, I mean, I strongly believe
it's just what Tor sells.
Fantasy is a setting rather than a genre. So you can actually have any kind of story. Like, it's quite common to have the sort of the classic kind of epics are sort of adventure travel stories or quest stories, but the setting is always what the fantasy is. And you can have like in my case, a closed room mystery, and you can have horror, and you could have romance. You can have like a serial killer thriller. There's all kinds of things you can do while just sitting in a fantasy setting. I don't know how to write stories that aren't in a fantasy setting. So it doesn't seem to matter what I'm writing. It will end up being in a slightly different world, because that's just how my brain works.
So who were some of your influences growing up, and maybe who are some of your influences now in your writing?
Oh gosh, Robin Hobb was my favorite writer. She's been my favorite writer since I first read Assassins I guess I was probably 14 or 15, and I just remember reading that trilogy and thinking, oh well, someone's already written the actual perfect fantasy trilogy. Is there any real point anybody else try?
Everybody else go ahead and quit.
So I mean, she has always been my favorite, and she remains my favorite writer. I love everything she does. Her books just mean the absolute world to me. I've reread them more times than I've reread anything else. But in terms of other influences, there was a whole raft of fantasy books that came out in my kind of formative years when I was a teenager in Australia. The books that were put out here, I just compulsively bought everything that was out. I mean, you can see my little collection back here.
Just a small collection,
Just a small collection. People like Kate Elliott. Kate Elliott was a huge influence on me from the same sort of, like, from right back then and continuing. She just continues. This is my next read. That I will do once I've finished reading some arcs. It's Kate's newest book. And she's just been putting things out in all different areas of science fiction and fantasy for, the whole time I've wanted to be a writer. So she's incredible. People like there was a big raft of kind of 90s fantasy in Australia by Australian writers, largely women. So people like Sarah Douglas and Trudy Canavan, Garth Nix, Glenda Lark, Kate Forsyth. Those sort of writers were all putting books out in like I said, the years, my kind of teenage years and early 20s, when I was really kind of cementing my love for the genre. Gosh, what else did I read obsessively back then? Oh, so many books here. Terry Pratchett was a huge thing. My Pratchett collection's up there. I just used to I used to have a standing order with the bookstore. Whenever a new Pratchett came in, we had this amazing bookstore when I was a teenager in the closest sort of shopping centre that I could get to, called Gaslight Books, which is this beautiful, just science fiction and fantasy bookstore. And had a big old-fashioned gas lamp out the front. And the owner was in there all the time, and she sort of had the finger on the pulse for everything. So she would always tell you what was coming in and what was new and exciting. Jenny Fallon too. I love Jenny Fallon. So I'd spent my entire, as soon as I got a job, I just used to spend my entire salary going in and buying books at Gaslight. But I read all of the big names of the kind of American and UK writers that were making it to Australia at that point. Even the ones that now don't really hold up so well. I devoured them all when I was that age. I think I just used to try to get through pretty much everything. These days I'm much more focused on trying to keep up with newer writers, because there's just so much brilliant stuff coming out all the time. Like you can't keep up with everything, but it just keeps getting better and better. We're just in such a golden age of writers. People like Shannon Chakraborty and Tasha Suri and my friend Devin Madsen, and just all these beautiful new shout out. There's just so many. I can't possibly shout out all of my friends because there's too many of them and they're too wonderful. But there's an incredible variety. Like every kind of story that you could want, that just wouldn't have been available to me as a child or a teenager. It's just now, so you can just get your paws on pretty much anything. Like the different slices of fantasy. It was always a rich genre, to be fair. But what actually made it onto the bookstores and the standard bookstores was necessarily curated, and now I just feel like you've got access to so much more. And there's just so many writers I admire. There's people like Nora Jamison, who's just writing just complete groundbreaking, amazing work. Robert Jackson Bennett's Divine Cities trilogy just completely blew me away when I read those a few years ago. Seth Dickinson is incredible. The Baru Cormorant books are just really, really wonderful. Sorry, I could just keep going.
Now you mentioned Bennett. I don't know if you've read his Founders series yet. Foundry Side and Shorefall. Oh,
I haven't read Shorefall. I haven't
haven't read the Divine series yet, but
oh my god,
two are. Oh my gosh,
David, Divine Cities. I really enjoyed.
Move it up to TBR, right?
I really enjoyed Foundry Side, but Divine Cities is perfection. It is.
Really? Okay.
I mean, it's probably a little less, maybe it's a little less accessible, so it's not. I know, like Foundry Side did really well, and it's probably a bit kind of quicker paced and maybe more sort of mainstream market. But the Divine Cities are just
incredible.
The writing, the world building, the characters, just superb. Just really, really amazing. I came across City of Stairs because I had been kind of looking. It was at the same time the book was announced, at the same time ish that I was querying or looking to start querying City of Lies, and I was looking for things that I was keeping my eye out for comp books and books that kind of had a mystery structure as well as being fantasy. And so I'd seen Robert talk about the book and the fact that it was mystery fantasy, on social media and stuff. And so I was waiting for it and looking out for it. I had it pre-ordered and was really excited to read it. So I'd been on top of those from the beginning just because of that. The books aren't very similar to mine, but they have that kind of, this is actually a mystery sort of spy thriller story in fantasy packaging. But anyway, I highly recommend them. They're just really, really beautifully written.
Yeah, it's funny.
I'm going to miss people who are amazing. I'm sorry in advance. People I've forgotten to say.
I'm sorry, everybody. It's funny though. You name all these authors, and I see all the time on like message boards and stuff. People are like, I've read everything. Can somebody recommend something to me? I'm like, all right, can you just like open, like Book Depository or Barnes and Noble, or I mean even freaking Amazon, and just type in like fantasy books. There are thousands of pages of books,
Yeah.
and I mean, and highly rated books and great books. And honestly, if you just get on Twitter and look at the book community and look at debut authors that are hitting every single year, because it feels like there's 100 or 200 traditionally published debut books every year, and
you can't
and like you said, it's impossible to keep up, and it's impossible to have read them all. But yeah, it's astounding, and that's why I haven't read a lot of series, maybe even 2 or 3 years ago, because I'm trying to keep up with the debuts. Just be like, okay, this is the one to look out for, et cetera, et cetera.
I know. I fall behind really quickly, and my theory is I buy books. I don't always have time to read them, but I buy them for supporting the authors, and then I will get to reading them eventually. But my theory is if I try to read book one of everything, rather than trying to keep up the whole series, I read book one of everything, and then I fit in book twos and threes.
I like it. That's what I do. I like it.
Because I just don't. I mean, I love reading, but there's the pile of things to be read is insurmountable. And you want to be able to read new things, debuts that you get as arcs. You want to make sure that you read them in a timely fashion, so you can blurb them and so on. And then you've got books which are written by friends that you're just really excited to read, and books by authors that are reliable, that you're looking forward to, and it's going to be great. And that's just the circle of like things you have a direct connection to. But then there's just also like heaps of other books that sound amazing and you want to get into. And so for me, it's not in any way an indictment of a series. If I've only read the first book, I've only read the first book of a whole bunch of series that I really loved, just because of timing. And it's not getting any easier.
It's not, because they're just continually coming out, and you've got new publishers, new imprints, and so forth. It's impossible. And but I kind of do what you do. I read the first book, and I know I will continue it at some point. But I'm like, there's so many other first books I have to get to.
I know. Although I'm saying this on a podcast to promote my second book, so I should say, please read second books. Read them very enthusiastically.
It's right there in its gorgeousness.
I really need.
But see, I decided the past month that I'm just gonna try to read everything that's gonna come out next year that I've already got. So I read, The Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman. I'm gonna read The Two-Faced Queen by Nick Martell. I'm reading Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I mean, I'm trying to get all these things. I'm like, all right, this is mid 2021. Do it now, because it won't happen next year. And so I'm like, that's kind of like my game plan. I'm still failing miserably because I've got so many other books that come out in 2021. But I'm like, if I can kind of get a head start on it, maybe I can catch up at some point. But the past 6 months have just been impossible to actually get through any books. I mean, it's taken me a month to read a book where it used to take me a couple of days, and I was listening to audiobooks, one a day, getting them done. Actually, I can't hide the headspace.
The lack of transit time has really killed my my getting through books, because one of the ways that I managed to successfully get through books is audiobooks. So I'd anything that I really wanted to get through in a decent amount of time, I'd put on audio, because then I could actually guarantee it would happen just from driving to and from work and walking the dogs and so on. I'd be able to get through that book. But then lockdown meant that I just didn't have that transit time anymore, which really dropped off my audio listening. And I always sort of feel like I'm always behind on something, usually more than one thing.
I think everybody is. They just don't talk about it.
Everybody is. But if I was listening to an audiobook, it was because I was doing something else, driving or doing the dishes or walking the dogs or something. So it didn't feel like, it's just pure recreation. I'm allowed to do it while I'm getting something else done. Whereas sitting down with a book, even a book I really, really want to read, that is a sort of a direct time where I could be doing something that I'm obliged to do.
Right.
So I'd always feel sort of guilty, like I'm reading, but really I could be at my computer getting more work done.
Who needs
It's
work?
a direct trade. If I'm reading, I could be writing, or I could be, answering interview
Gosh, I
questions, or
can't. I can't
something.
imagine if I ever have that problem because I'm like, because like I
Yeah.
haven't gotten to the point where I'm like I could be writing right now. One of these days I'll get there. One of these days I'll actually sit down and be like, okay, I'm gonna, because the last few authors I've talked to all said they gave themselves a year or a decade. They're like, I'm going to write a novel and have it at least queried in this timeline. And I'm like, I just haven't. I don't think I've given myself a time frame to do it, so that's why I keep putting it off. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have something written by like June of next year. Maybe I'll actually do it, but I
Like I
don't
said,
see a
artificial
light where
deadlines
I
are a good
have
idea.
time.
Yeah, you just have to kind of. I mean, some people aren't motivated by artificial deadlines. I am very motivated by fake things. It's it's ridiculous. I'm easily manipulated even when I
Quote of the
know.
night.
So putting false things like nano work on me, because even though it makes literally no difference whether I get the 1667 words in the day, like what does it matter if I wrote 2,000 yesterday, I could be a few hundred short today and it would average out. But no, because the little graph is there and it tells me that's the number of words I have to do that day. I have to do them that day. And it's just one of those completely stupid, arbitrary numbers that doesn't mean anything. And yet I feel like a failure if I don't do it. So I do it. And it was the same. Like I only got City written after having, started it, like I said, 6 or something years before. I'm very, very good at procrastinating. And I only really got it because I decided to impose a deadline on myself to say, right, I'm home. I'm going to write this in a year. In a year's time, I want to have at least a workable draft that I can start with. But having said that, I then, didn't start querying that book for, I think I faffed around editing it for like a year and then spent some absurd amount of time putting off actually querying it. Because of tinkering and doing obsessive making spreadsheets and stuff, anything to avoid actually taking the next step. So I can't really offer I'm not looking down from the lofty heights of somebody who does not do exactly that. So anyway, I sympathise. But try.
You're not talking down to me to tell me this is how you should do it.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm hopeless. I'm the worst. And really, I just.
You're the best. You have written a phenomenal novel, and I have heard you've written a phenomenal sequel. You have gotten some fantastic words said about you from some very great authors that you even mentioned in your little spiel about all the influences you have, and you're mentioned with one of your favorite writers ever, and I mean, you have done something.
I've done something.
You've done more than a lot.
I've been very lucky, and I'm very conscious that I've been very lucky, and even though it's a weird and difficult industry at times,
I can imagine.
I can't imagine not doing it.
Yeah,
it's all pretty good.
Well, speaking of City of Lies, so I want to talk a little bit about it because I know it's still probably kind of a fresh read for people that maybe haven't jumped into say maybe they haven't even looked at books that Tor's released, or they haven't looked at anything that's been released in the last couple of years. But City of Lies was the winner of the Dittmer Awards for Best Novel and Best New Talent, the Norma K. Hemming Award, and the Ari Alice Award for Best Fantasy Novel. And you are also a finalist for the Astounding Award for Best New Writer at the 2020 Hugos. So again, I think you've done something. I want to know, can you tell the audience maybe that haven't had a chance to read City of Lies a little bit about the book?
Sure. So City of Lies is about a brother and sister who are poison tasters or proofers for the ruling family of a city. So essentially their sort of secret duty is to protect the ruler and the ruler's heirs and family from attacks via poison. At the beginning of the story, the current proofer, their uncle, and the chancellor are both killed by an unknown poison, a previously unknown poison. And so Jove and Kalina are suddenly thrust into the roles that they didn't expect to have for many years. So they're left protecting the Chancellor's heir, who is also their childhood best friend, Tane. And to make matters worse, during the funeral, an army appears at the gates and lays siege to the city. So they are trapped for the course of the story in a besieged city with somebody on the ruling council who they believe has poisoned the Chancellor and is trying to poison the new Chancellor. And they don't know why they're under siege. And they're basically just trying to keep their heads above water, trying to protect the Chancellor, trying to figure out what happened, why the country has risen up against them. So it's like I said earlier, it's a kind of closed room mystery novel in a fantasy dressing. It's big on sibling relationships. The key relationship in the story is a brother-sister relationship. It's not really a standard, they're not really sort of standard fantasy heroes. So neither of them are good fighters. One of them is chronically ill, and she just needs to use her brains and wits and thoughtfulness to solve mystery. The other, again, not a fighter. He's kind of a scholarly, quiet type with anxiety issues, who's just trying to get his sister and his best friend out of this alive. So there's lots of politics and intrigue and mystery sort of elements, rather than being a big kind of magical creature battle-y sort of story, although there is a little bit of that.
Magical battle-y type. That needs to be blurred. It's not very magically battle-y type.
Yeah. As you can see, this is why authors aren't in charge of writing their own promotional works. I don't think they'd let me put the word battle-y on the cover.
Oh my gosh, please.
I just feel it's important to let people know it's not battle-y, and that the main characters are protecting people from poison. They are not assassins, because I think the fact that the series is called The Poison Wars, some people mistakenly expected it to be sort of staffed with snarky assassin characters, and they're not. They're cinnamon rolls. Good, decent people trying to do their best in shitty circumstances, basically. It's a fairly optimistic kind of fantasy, which might appeal to you in these current fun times. It's not grimdark. And yeah, I mean, it's got the kind of things that I like in my fantasy, like good characters and politics and interesting different worlds. And you should definitely buy it. It's on sale for $2.99 on all electronic platforms at the moment, until the end of the month. So you should definitely buy it. Several copies.
The perfect Thanksgiving read.
Exactly. Or you're sorting out your Christmas presents early for people. Yeah. Definitely. It makes a very attractive doorstop if you don't actually enjoy it. It's a solid book.
It is. I looked the complete wrong way, by the way. I always look the opposite way of where it's.
Oh, I know. I do.
It is quite a chunk, and I have 2 of them.
Yeah, I appreciate that you have 2. I highly recommend owning as many copies as possible.
I had to have a US and a UK copy. They have different covers.
They do have different covers, and they're both very pretty.
They are.
I'm very torn with the second one. I don't have a copy of I can't show you the US copy. Sorry. This is Hollow Empire, the UK version.
Oh no,
the only one I have. I have one UK version. I have not yet got US copies, so sorry, but it is very pretty. I can say from the photos, it's very nice.
I'll make sure it's the cover for the video, so everybody knows just how pretty it is.
Excellent. Well, you can see. Hang on. You can see that's the original pencil sketch on the wall up there.
Ooh.
Which is awesome. So Greg Ruth is the artist who does the American covers, and he's just superb. He's the best. So I have his original pencil sketches for both the covers on my wall.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's like a cool like author thing to be having a cover art on the wall. Life goals.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I just had to throw this out there. So the first line from City of Lies: I was 7 years old the first time my uncle poisoned me. Like that's like one of the best first lines ever. Just FYI.
Yeah,
And I remember when that was thrown out there before the release, and I think you caught a lot of people with that one. So just bravo for that first line.
Oh, thank you. It's all downhill from there.
Yes, all day. So I want to know what is it that interested you in Poisons, and more specifically, having a proofer as the main character.
I when I think back on this, I can't tell you which events came first. I think it was probably just a convergence of things I was thinking about. But, so I was interested in the poison tasting element because I think I don't know if you did this in science classes in America, but in Australia it's quite common to do this thing in science where you taste, there's a chemical that's in coffee that some people can't taste and some people can taste. That's why some people hate coffee because they can taste this very unpleasant tasting thing. And that got me thinking about how different people can taste different elements, and people have basically different qualities of taste buds, and they're capable of detecting different things. So there are super tasters and really low tasters. So if you really, you can have really incredibly spicy food and stuff, you might be like a low taster. So you don't get as affected. You don't get as affected by various things on your tongue. But there are definitely people who are super tasters and whose taste sense is incredible and can taste a broader range with more intensity than regular people, which I thought was really interesting. And I was wondering whether it would be something that you could basically breed a line of people who were really amazing tasters, and what you could do with that, aside from making really good wine tasting notes. So I was I wondered how you could write about a skilled position of tasting, and that kind of led to the idea of what sort of society would have would have a need for someone to be a skilled taster. So there were tasters in historical societies, but it tended to be kind of canary in a coal mine, sort of people just being used as expendable.
Taste this. Let's see if you die.
Yeah, that's right. If you die, it's not safe. Whereas obviously that doesn't make for a very good story fodder, because if you
pretty quick book. It's like a children's book.
Yeah, so I thought it would be fun to write about somebody who was able to do it as an actual skilled profession, and that kind of led to me building the society that way. So I think it was probably just thinking about super tasters in that context that kind of got the idea about proofing, I think.
I gotcha.
Probably could have answered this better a few years ago.
Yeah, because and I also found it interesting. You added a new poison or I guess herb or spice or something. At the beginning of every chapter, and you kind of explained its use and so forth. I thought it was very interesting too, and it kind of immerses you a little bit more into the world and into what Joven was actually doing. At least at the beginning, until the story progressed quite quickly. It's really hard to say that quite quickly. I don't know.
quite quickly, but it's quite hard.
Yeah.
Those epigraphs are really fun. The thing is, when you're writing about a poison taster, you have all of these ideas about cool poisoning scenarios that could happen, but you don't really get to use that many of them in a story, because you can't have a different. Your baddie's not going to have. I'm going to try poisoning with this poison this week and this poison this week. It doesn't really work as a story thing. It's it was a really fun, and I must say, this is my agent's idea to put those little poison notes in. It's a brilliant idea. So it was a great way of being able to just say, giving a world building feel without slowing the story down. They were just little kind of extra notes, and sort of teaching you a little bit about the profession without having to try to contrive a way to put that into the text. I used a lot of. They're all fictional poisons in the books for a number of reasons. Aforementioned laziness, being one of them. One of them. Although I have to say, making up that many, there's a lot of chapters in the book, making up that many poisons didn't end up being a very lazy exercise at all, because it's quite difficult. It started getting pretty. We added those to the chapters quite late in the piece, so I definitely remember being, I think it was like right before it was due, like 1 o'clock in the morning, I discovered that there was a double up between chapters and I had to write a new one, and frantically texting my sister, I can't think of any other symptoms, think of something. Anyway, got a bit strained by the end. But like, the advantage of making things up, obviously, besides fun, it's fun to make things up. And also it means that I'm not writing like an instructional manual for how to poison people, which is good. And it gave me a bit more flexibility to have the poison serve the story in a way that, like, I based a lot of them on real world poisons, but I didn't want to be confined to making the poisons behave exactly the way that they would in our world.
Yeah.
Because, and also, like, it you know, if you're using only real world things, then there's an element of some people who are going to read it are going to be thinking, oh, well, that's cyanide, so this is going to happen, or whatever. Like, you want to leave yourself a bit of room to surprise, and to have, you know, the characters figure things out in a way that you might not be able to do if everything is a legit poison. But a lot of you, if you look at those notes carefully, a lot of them you'll recognise as similar to real world poisons, just not exactly the same. Yeah,
Gotcha.
no, they were really fun. And in the second book, I didn't want to do another, 30-odd fictional poisons. I thought it might get a bit old. So this time each chapter begins with a small historical tasting note. So the extracts from journals of Joven's uncle and their ancestors, just sort of recording the details of a poisoning or an attempted poisoning that occurred. So it's like a little historical snippet. And I've got to tell you, they were an absolute blast to write. They were really fun, and that was another way again of getting in fun things that are world-building notes, or just like cool poison things that happen in real life that I can do a fictionalized version of. And also I got to fictionally poison a whole bunch of my friends to fill in, because you needed all these kind of names for people in the past who got poisoned or poisoned people, or were proofers in the past. If you read those carefully, you will find references to other fantasy authors and some bloggers and some members of my family. Which is a lot of fun. So there's all the private jokes sort of rammed in those chapter notes, but they're also just like really fun ways of, putting in poisonings that there's no room for in the story, but you really just wanted to tell a story about, a poison that made someone look up so much that they got poo coming out their nose and they died, because it's too gross and too fun to ignore.
People are always looking for people to kill off. So I know a lot of times, authors will do, like I don't know if you really call it like a giveaway or something, but they'd run like a little raffle to, like, I'll kill you in my next book, or I'll let you figure out a way this character dies. I think that's kind of neat that you just no, I'm just going to take the liberty, just kill everybody.
No, I mean, I did do one of those. So
one
of my readers got poisoned as part of the fundraiser when we were fundraising for raising money for bushfire relief in Australia. I organised a giveaway for a whole bunch of really awesome fantasy authors. We all chucked in books, and people bid on the package and stuff. But one of the things that I chucked up for bidding was the right to be poisoned off in one of my chapter headings. So
that's awesome.
The lovely Catherine has been poisoned off in my one of my chapters, which is really fun.
That's fantastic. So I wanted to ask, it's kind of implied throughout the novel that Joven is on the spectrum. Is that true? Is it just an anxiety thing? And if so, was that like a kind of a sticking point when you created his character arc?
So I see Jove as having OCD or something very like it, which manifests in a lot of anxiety symptoms. He kind of came to me like that. So I never thought of him as anything other than how he came out, essentially. Look, OCD is a tricky one because it has so much bad representation in media. You often see it's one of the more commonly portrayed mental illnesses in television in particular, but it's portrayed in a lot of really annoying, damaging ways. So you often see it sort of used as a substitute for like people having no social skills but being a super genius, for example, or just like really surface level things like, oh, they're really clean, or they have to line things up in a particular way. And OCD in reality is a really horrible, crippling condition that just makes life very, very difficult. And I wanted to try to portray some of that in Jovan, in the way that his condition affects him, and the intrusive thoughts that he has to deal with, and the way that ritual kind of helps him get over sticking points where something is kind of driving him wild. So I wanted him to. That was how I conceived him in the first place, and it was important to me to portray that well. One of the things that I've really liked best about the process of having released a book is kind of seeing people responding to Jove's OCD and Kalina's chronic health issues, because they don't get a lot of portrayal in fantasy. So people have written to me telling me that they sort of saw themselves represented for the first time, which really means a lot. That's probably one of my favorite things about having done the books is kind of seeing that it's really meant something to a bunch of people to see it done. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I agree. You don't really see that a lot at all. You may see it, once or twice a year, maybe in between fantasy and science fiction. Sometimes it's not really in your face either. It's sometimes kind of like a secondary character. So the fact that you kind of brought them to the forefront, I thought was very interesting. And I feel it makes them, a little more memorable, because they're not your standard cookie cutter type character in a fantasy novel. And you even mentioned at the beginning how they're not, the strongest, they're not the smartest, etc. But they kind of eke out a living, and they kind of get, I guess you would say, stronger as the novel progresses. But they kind of find a place in your heart early on, and it's pretty great. So I commend you on doing that. That's, I know it can be difficult. But I think you portrayed them in such a way that, like you said, a lot of people, will reach out to you. And I think that's kind of awesome that they did. So, yeah,
like, don't get me wrong. It can be hard because I think we're really programmed, and fantasy's very guilty of this. It's really hard not to solve problems with violence all the time. So having characters who aren't sort of by default fighters or super assassins or whatever, or magic users, it means that you kind of have to think about problem solving big kind of world threatening issues in a slightly different way. And media kind of teaches us that fighting is the way out of problems a lot of the time. And fantasy relies a lot on big battles and big magic and violence. And like, don't get me wrong, I enjoy very much a lot of this. And I'm a martial artist, so like, writing fight scenes is something I really enjoy. And it was a kind of a fun challenge to have my characters get involved in altercations that can't just sort of battle their way out of using their fist. And writing fight scenes with a character who's not a fighter, and making them still fun and realistic is a challenge, but it's a good challenge, I think.
That you just kind of helped me figure something out. So this little con that we're doing at the end of January, I think I've got a panel for you now that you mentioned
awesome.
that. I think I'm going to put you on the SFF Fight Club panel.
Fun.
There were. I don't want to make the panels too big, but I think we're just gonna have to add you in. I mean, you'll be on there with like Evan Winter and Rob Hayes and Alexander Darwin and a few other people, because we're basically just gonna talk about fighting and basically battles in fantasy and science fiction, and just kind of like the mechanics of maybe from sword fighting to hand combat stuff. I think you'd be pretty good.
Awesome.
So
that sounds great.
So
I love this stuff.
That was a pretty easy connection. So awesome. sorry to divulge from the top.
I felt really bad. I was at a sort of Supernova here. It's sort of like a Comic-Con sort of thing, like a big pop culture festival. And I was chatting to some guys after a panel, and they were really excited that I can't remember how it came up, but the fact that I was a jiu-jitsu instructor came up. And so we were talking, there were a bunch of guys who do jiu-jitsu. And so we were chatting like really enthusiastically about jiu-jitsu and having a great time. And then they were like, oh, I can't wait to like read your book. And I'm like, a lot of jiu-jitsu in it, I'm sorry. There's some. I feel bad. It's not actually a super fighting kind of book. But anyway. They're real. I promise the fights in the book when they occur are realistic, but they may not be kind of like big set piece dramatic ones.
So in City and then kind of continue into Hollow, did you find it difficult juggling the duo's tenacity to solve the murders, keeping the city from falling to a rebel army, also outwitting career politicians that are way older than them, and then also surviving their constant threats to their life? I mean, I have to imagine you found it just a wee bit difficult juggling all that.
I've got a problem, David. I always make things super complicated. I was just when I was writing a proposal for this new book that I'm writing, my editor looked at it and was like, there's a lot going on. Maybe you pare back the complication. I can't help it. My instinct is always to do something and then think, what could that be? What could that be hiding? Like this action, what could that person be lying about in this sort of scene? What's the surface level thing we're discussing? What could really be going on behind the scenes? Or I love complicating things. People are complicated, and I just find it really difficult to pare back sometimes. So you should have seen the original draft of City if you think this version was complicated. I had to substantially cut down some storylines, remove others entirely. A few people survived City who didn't originally survive City, so they should be grateful to me, because their extra murders were too much. Yeah, so my instinct is to write too complicated, and then my agent and editor will just come back a little bit.
they'll gently tap you on the hand and be like, "Okay, we're going to cut this a little bit."
I know. How long was your first draft? Of City, I actually don't know how long the first draft was. When I queried it, it was it actually got longer in edits compared to the version that I sold originally. So I think it was 160,000 words when I queried it back in the day, and then it ended up about 185 when it was published, I think. Probably the first draft that I wrote that no one ever saw really was probably north of 200 when I first wrote it, and had to be cut back. And then the first draft of Hollow Empire was 300,000 words.
Good night.
Too many words.
That's a lot of words. Did you use the entire encyclopedia?
This is what happens when I'm left to my own devices. I can't be trusted. And this is why having an outline is amazing, because if left to my own devices, I will apparently write 300,000 words. Yeah. I do overcomplicate things.
That's all the words, man. That's all the words.
It is all of the words. I don't recommend that as a drafting process. Don't write 300,000 word books that you then have to like cut in half.
Wow.
Imagine publishing that. It would be like an insane. I mean, these are pretty chonk anyway, but 300,000 words is just.
I'm trying to think. I have a book that's even close to that. That would be a chunk. I mean, maybe.
Probably some of them.
Maybe like a Sanderson.
Yeah,
that'd be like a Sanderson chunk.
Probably some of the Game of Thrones ones are. Well, there's definitely some north of 200 in that pile.
And even some of those like just aren't quite that big, but that is too many.
I think Empire of Gold must be. I think that's about 240. So that's pretty big, but you'd have to be even bigger again. Justin Call wrote a book last year, Master of Shadows, I think, which I'm pretty sure is in the.
Master of Sorrows.
Yeah, that's it. I'm pretty sure the sequel to that, he said on Twitter, is some insane amount.
Yeah, it's stupid.
It was like 900. I think he wrote like 900 pages or something. So my 300,000 draft it's fine. Hollow Empire is now exactly the same length as City. They have literally the same number of pages. So they are equally chonk, and they will match perfectly on your bookshelf, and you will not have to get through 300,000 words, I promise.
So speaking of Hollow, I want to know what can we expect in Hollow, and how do our characters, how have they grown up since City of Lies?
Well, they have grown. It's set a few years after the events of City. I'm going to try to do this without spoilers. So it's set a few years after the events of City, and the kind of world has settled into a new normal. And Jove has taken on a new apprentice into the future. So he is having to grapple with kind of parenthood, I guess, learning to sort of reconcile the obligations that he has as a proofer, training the next generation of proofer, with his kind of role as a guardian of a 13-year-old girl. So he has to kind of grapple with a lot of Hollow is about grappling with parenthood and what you owe the people you care about, and how you balance that with obligations that put them in harm's way. So the city has kind of, found a new normal and stabilized, and they're still kind of grappling with how to make reparations for, again, this is quite hard to without spoilers, how to make reparations for the things that came out in the last book. But the ultimate big bad is still out there. Jove and Kalina are still worried. The book is set during a large spring carnival, kind of like a Olympics and carnival kind of scenario, where the city's full bursting with people from other countries, and from all around their own country, all here for this big festive event. Jove and Kalina and Tane are pretty convinced that their enemies are going to use this as a chance to strike again, but everybody else is sort of trying to move on and thinking that they're probably just clinging to the mistakes of the past a bit. So there are new villains and old villains and new threats, but essentially the same sort of flavor of our main characters trying to solve a mystery, identify treacherous parties among the visiting dignitaries and nobles, work out the identity of the person who sort of orchestrated the events of City, and it all kind of comes to a head in this festival. So yeah, there are assassins and witches and new magic and old magic, and lots of poisonings and the usual kind of mystery and politics and stuff that was in City. So hopefully, if you enjoyed City, I think you will also enjoy Hollow.
Fantastic. Yeah, and according to Patrick Leo, we're all going to love Hollow Empire because he says it's better than City. So, and I trust him. He is one of the only reviewers that I trust every single word he says. So if he says it's better, then I know that we're in for a real treat. So,
Oh, that's very sweet. So far, yeah, as I said, touch wood. So far, people seem to dig it, um, which is really good because it's very hard to have perspective on your own work, and it was a long time coming, obviously, and there were quite a few hiccups in the the road to getting it out. So it's really awesome to see people responding to it, and yeah, I hope people will pick it up, and hopefully people who hadn't had a chance to pick City up can get it now on sale in time for Hollow Empire to come out. It's a complete duology as it is, but you know, if you buy lots of copies, there could be a third.
do you feel like the story is over? I mean, I know you said it's a completed duology. I mean, do you feel like there's another one in there somewhere? Another story?
Look, it's hard to write in these sort of circumstances, because it has to be both the end of the duology, because that's what I was contracted for, and if there are no more books, I wanted readers to be able to be satisfied with the story as it was, but also leaving open the possibility of more. So the story is it can be done, but doesn't have to be done, basically. So,
I like that answer better than like I can't say anything. I'm not. Yeah, that's all I always get. I can't say anything. Contractually obligated.
I can say, look, there's a third book outlined, which I may or may not get to write at some point. It sort of entirely depends on how these ones kind of do. So if you're the kind of reader who doesn't want to pick up a series until it's complete, then it's complete and it's done. It's not a cliffhanger. It's not a cliffhanger or anything. So it's the main mystery of the story of the spans the two of them is solved and done. But I certainly have more ideas for the characters, which I would be very happy to write about. But yeah, it's not left on a cliffhanger or anything.
I gotcha. That's awesome. Well, let's see that cover one more time, since I know you've got the non-US cover.
Yeah, non-US cover. It's very pretty. It is. Sorry, I'm very bad with the camera. It's lovely and rich and golden.
Absolutely.
And it looks very. Oh, hang on. It looks very nice next to City. The two of them together. See?
Oh, it does. Oh, look at that.
Very pretty.
Very nice.
Yeah, they're nice. They're nice test. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't wait to US cover, but it's very pretty as well. Yeah, I've been very, very lucky. The cover gods have been very kind to me.
Well, everybody, Hollow Empire hits. Man, it is just like in a few days on December 1st.
Tuesday? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Hooray! And if you're in the UK or Australia, you can buy it tomorrow. Yay!
I guess I need to go ahead and get a flight. I'll go get it. Well, Sam, I really appreciate you taking the time to come chat with me. I know the 17-hour time difference is can definitely throw people off, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you. And I know we'll be talking more in just a couple of months. So yes, and just a little bit of a spoiler. Yes, we're gonna do another virtual convention at the end of January. We're gonna do it the 25th or the 29th. We're gonna do a whole week of panels. We've got, I think we've got 75 authors signed up this time around, where we only had 35 last time. So It could be a bit bigger.
You're going to have a busy week.
Yeah. Luckily, I've got like 5 other people set to do panels, so I don't have to do them all. But yeah, we're going to have, I think, 15 panels, and then we're going to have a 3 or 4 day D&D session going on with several authors. So it's gonna be big. I mean, they're even Brian Anderson's even like talking about opening up like a store, like a storefront. I guess people can go like buy the books where the authors are gonna be on the panels and stuff. Yeah, it's gonna be like stupid. And I'm like, why am I still doing this by myself? I don't know.
I'm very glad you've got help. That's awesome.
Yeah, but I'm glad you're gonna be on there, just like we had during Mayday Con. but yeah, we're gonna do like 2 to 3 panels a day throughout the whole week. We may extend it to Saturday if it just needs to be, but it's gonna be awesome, and I hope you're looking forward to it because I know I am.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
always enjoy the chance to talk to you. So, but
Yeah.
everybody, if you haven't read City of Lies, like like she was saying, it's $2.99 on Kindle until the end of the month, and then Hollow Empire hits the beginning of next month. So it's a quick 1-2 punch. You can get both of them, finish out the duology, and then we definitely look forward to what you got coming next.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It was lovely to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching,
To you as
everyone.
well.